Hello.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. I joined late and it looks like we've got a quorum, so we can go ahead and get started, everybody. Maureen, would you go ahead and take roll, please?
Sure. Chair Bowden,
Present.
Vice Chair Green,
Present.
Member Dickerson,
Present.
Member Johnson, not present. Member Strom,
Present.
Member Watson, and Alt Member Radovid, not present.
Okay. So we do have quorum, right? Yeah.
Yes,
four.
we do.
Okay, got it. All right. So item number 2 on the agenda is consideration of minutes from our previous meeting back in December. Happy New Year, everyone. So would someone please move to approve the minutes?
I move.
Thank you,
Second.
Colleen, and thank you, Carson, for a second. Are there any corrections or discussions of the minutes? That looks like it's good. So please vote by a show of hands to approve the minutes as recorded. And that looks like unanimous. So thank you all very much. The minutes are accepted. The next item on the agenda is the public forum. Maureen, do we have any public forum attendees?
We do not.
All right, so we're going to move on to code enforcement, significant events, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Dave. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to all of you. I hope everyone is having a good one so far. Looks like a lot of the news is very positive as we move forward with a lot of the COVID stuff. So hopefully we're taking a different change. I know that my spouse's hospital is seeing a decrease in positivity cases and cases in the ER. So I just wanted to shout out about that. There is no statistics attached due to some illnesses, planned annual leave, not just within our department, but with upper administration. I don't have those December statistics or the annual report that's been approved to present to all of you. So I hope to have that by next month. So I apologize. I wish to have that done by the 15th. It just was not physically possible. I want to give you an update on some concerns and things that are happening within the community that are affecting code enforcement. The first one regarding trash haulers. 2 of the major trash haulers announced several weeks ago that due to staff shortages and budget cuts, they are consolidating their routes and rerouting. They are rerouting to a Monday and Wednesday, however, which is within code. A lot of residents did not receive notification, either through their bill, they're not paying attention to their bill or not opening their emails. And so we did have a considerable number of people that were missed on Wednesday's pickup. So there's a lot of extra trash cans that are full in alleys and front of homes. And so we're really being patient and working with residents as the trash haulers and citizens become accustomed to their new pickup days. One of our code officers was involved in a crash. They were on Santa Fe, parked at a red light, and someone wasn't paying attention, texting, and was running late for a meeting and was crashed into at 50 miles an hour. Fortunately, there's no significant injuries. The new trucks are really designed well. The subject's truck or car was completely smashed in the front. The code truck took minimal damage, but all that energy was transferred to some injuries that are not visible. And so we do have a code officer that is on light duty. So that is putting us down a little bit staffing wise. We have been out doing snow and ice inspections. We were 48 hours after the last snowfall for enforcement due to the January 3rd city observed holiday. So enforcement did take place on the 4th. We really did focus in on the major business corridors, or those corridors that really do rely on heavy alternative transportation modes as well as businesses. And so we did issue, since the beginning of the year in the snowfall, we've issued 126 snow and ice violations. So regardless of our short staffing and holidays and time off, we still were able to get out there and do 126 violations. Many of you guys have heard or know that we are hiring a park ranger. One of our code officers, Officer Josh Ball, did put in his notice, and his last day was on January 6th. Him and his wife wanted to move to be closer to family in Kansas, and he was accepted to the Park Police program outside Kansas City. So we wished him all the best. He was here for 3 years. He did do a significant contribution to the city of Inglewood, especially he had formal education in customer service and hospitality, and he really did do a lot of extra training and propelled this division into a new direction with those key points regarding customer service. So it was very, very sad to see him leave. We did post the park ranger position because our current park ranger has 6 years of code enforcement experience and applied to take that position. So they've transferred. The current Officer Kenny, who was the park ranger, is doing 50% code enforcement, finishing up her training, in 50% park enforcement while we move into the new park ranger. We did post the position. It was closed today. We had 54 applicants. So we're looking to start those interviews in February. So the new park ranger, we're looking at onboarding somewhere around end of March, beginning of April. Should this round of interviews and backgrounds go successfully. And if you all don't know, we are still upheld to the same standards as a police officer when it comes to our background. We do have a very significant background investigation process. We do have to take a form of polygraph. We do have to take medical screenings and drug screenings. And so, and a very in-depth background investigation that goes back 10 years that interviews past employers, neighbors, a variety of things to make sure that they fit within our department and our high standards. I'm excited that since we started our park education regarding the new off-leash ordinances, we've had very positive encounters at all of our parks. We've run into very little resistance and quite a bit of voluntary compliance. So I'm quite happy to report that transition has been happening smoothly. The educational phase in media and public relations, as well as all the social medias, has gone well. There has been some feedback, and it continues to happen to city council but we continue our educational phase. At some point, with some of those that we know are repeat offenders, they will be issued violations. Members of the Code Enforcement Animal Welfare Team today spent a couple hours at the Capitol with legislators working on the legislative season pertaining to animal welfare and code enforcement. And so I just wanted to give you a quick highlight of what's happening at the Capitol this year regarding those. Let me get a couple notes. Some of them will at some point impact the city of Inglewood. One of the bills is going to be a pollinator bill. It's helping to protect, I don't know if all of you know that there's 928 native bee species outside of the imported honeybees that live in Colorado, and they are significant pollinators. And as you all know, without pollinators, we don't have any food. The bill is going to help create oversight of pollinators, can create a grant program to increase pollinators. It's also looking to give local control of local ordinances back to municipalities so that they can set the rules regarding certain types of pesticide usage. And then they're looking to restrict cannabinoids, which is the major contributing factor for hive collapse. And it's something that is ingrained in a lot of our food products, and it is sprayed on a lot of our seeds. So those plants and stuff have that when they grow inside of their, not just their pollen, but inside their leaves. And it really affects more than just pollinators, but small animals, other insects, butterflies, and small birds. Senate Bill 31 is going to prohibit certain fur trapping and restrict trophy hunting of bobcats, lions, mountain lions, lynx. They're also looking at some, there's a bill being introduced that's restricting the sale and export of horses for human consumption. Many of you don't know that that is actually an industry here within Colorado, where animals are sold to slaughter for meat, not necessarily human American consumption. That's not something that is typically enjoyed within the American palate, but it is exported. And so they're looking at doing that. Are you guys familiar with turtles, like the red ear sliders that most of us see within the pet industry? They've become a huge invasive nuisance species within the state of Colorado. They have been cited at our parks and then within our waterways. They are causing some endangerment problems for our native species. And so they're looking at setting up some funds to study that and look at the impacts that pet industry and restricting that pet industry. Around 1,200 red-eared sliders were given over to shelters over the last year, many of whom had to be euthanized because people just don't realize that they don't live 1 or 2 years. You get this cute little turtle and then it's still alive 50, 60 years from now. The biggest thing that I think is the most exciting is that there is some changes within the Veterinary Practice Act. There's a huge review, and part of that is going to be adding, currently rabies vaccination can only be administered by a veterinarian. And it just doesn't, it's not feasible. Just like with human vaccines, they're being administered by a multitude of qualified personnel. And so they're looking to apply sheltering personnel as well as vet techs and others within the industry that can administer those vaccines. They already can administer other vaccines, just not the rabies vaccine. And so they're looking to change that. Any questions on all of that?
Colleen?
Yeah, back to what you were talking about, the neonicotinoids, that was proposed to be safe for bees, and it's not proven to be, but it was supposed to be a substitute for glyphosate. Are we going to be able to ban glyphosate?
So I don't have the full bill. It was not up for the full legislation at this point. There are, that was one example. There's several others that are going to be restricted to commercial use only and heavily regulated. It would not be available to the public consumer. Thank you. That's a great question. Any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to follow up. In my neighborhood, there was a lady 2 years ago. She's died since then, but she went around to all the neighbors and convinced them not to use glyphosate Roundup because we were having an awful lot of bird deaths and bee deaths and everything. I mean, it was just awful. And it's come back now. We've got, at least in our area, most of the people aren't using glyphosate anymore.
I enjoy hearing that and the community spirit and a community working together to try and resolve that. So thanks for sharing that, Colleen. A few reminders. Chair Bowden, did you happen to get an email from me about the strategic plan and forwarding it to the members?
I did, and
I
I
just
did.
wanted to remind everyone that they did extend the deadline by 1 day because there were several boards that were not included and they were included this week. They wanted to make sure that every board was reminded. So if you haven't taken the time, that is our strategic plan for the city that City Council will adopt. And this is an opportunity the city wants to hear from you, especially from you as board members. So please make sure you take the time to fill it out and have your voices heard.
Thank you. Colleen?
Yeah, I have a question about that. I tried to take that survey and I found it impossible because it was set and I was supposed to rank it, but I didn't agree with most of them because they just tagged on little things that I didn't think were appropriate. And there was no place for me to say, I don't think any of this is appropriate, or I would like rewording of all of these outcomes and goals because they're contradictory. And so I don't know how to approach it other than just writing to council, all the council members with my ideas.
There is an email that should have been on there that you can go ahead and send. I believe there were some free form typing areas. All of the goals and stuff that were outlined are items I believe that City Council themselves identified to put into this plan and wanted to know what the rankings were. So
well, I can't comment on them. All I can do is rank them. And if I don't rank them, I can't put any information in on the comments.
okay, that sounds frustrating. I think your best bet would maybe to just email your current representative for your area, and you can always contact the clerk's office and let them know so that they can properly record that. But thank you for that feedback.
Dave, were there any items? I mean, I know code enforcement was included in several areas. Was there anything that struck you as highly important or concerning? I mean,
no, there's quite. So it's hard for me to explain my position on this because I am an Inglewood resident, and so I did complete it from the standpoint of an Inglewood resident rather than from my view as a supervisor. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just reserve comment on that.
That's fine.
But I appreciate you asking my opinion.
I did fill it out, and I hope others did take the time to. Even if you didn't necessarily agree with the way things were worded, it does give our council an indication of where the community thinks that they need to focus. So thank you for including us on that, Carson.
I just wanted to say, I feel on this form and others from the city, I had the same frustrations as Member Dickerson, that they come across extremely biased and don't allow for input that it aligns with how I feel frequently.
So Member Green, like I suggested to Member Dickerson, I would highly encourage you to maybe write a letter to the clerk's office that can go directly to the packet of all the council members. That's the best way to have your voice heard when it comes to those type of surveys. So they can document and record your opinion, or you can contact the city manager's office and let them know what your concerns are. I don't have any say in developing any of these. All I can do is give feedback that I've heard from you, and I will take that feedback back to, because it's generated out of the city's manager's office and the clerk's office, because this is their strategic goals.
Yeah, no, I know it's not something that you created. I just wanted to speak up and support this, the sentiment that I've felt that Member Dickerson had mentioned, and I appreciate your response, Code Manager Lewis. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have two more exciting reminders to let you know. We've started the planning process for 2022 of events, and there's two that I wanted to bring forward currently. The first one would be the Citizen Police Academy. They are taking applications starting from the March Academy. They are doing some new things. If you know anybody that wants to attend, please encourage them. It is a little bit of a commitment, but what the community learns is invaluable. It learns the inner workings of the police department, our decisions, our hiring processes, how code enforcement works. You even get an opportunity to go down to the police academy to see what tools they use for defensive driving, for shooting scenarios. You learn a lot about how the police department works from its records division, and gives you a better understanding of the overall picture of what's happening here within the police department. And then, yeah.
Quick question on that.
Yeah.
Is that back to like full normal, or is that still kind of COVID modified?
So our anticipation is that it would be fully in person. It is our anticipation, just to give you a tidbit, don't quote me that this is going to happen, but there is a review here at the end of the month regarding certain COVID policies within the health department. And so some new announcements will probably be made towards the end of the month. But again, it changes week to week, month to month. So our anticipated hope is that we are going to be in person.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I've always wanted to do that.
I encourage you to do it. Who here has done that? If you have the time to do it, it's every Wednesday. Yes, it's time consuming.
No,
But the amount of information that you learn is I teach at it. It's a really great opportunity.
is it during? I'm
You say
sorry.
every Wednesday, is it every week for
It's
how
in the
many
evening
weeks?
every week, and I can't remember how many weeks it is. I want to say it's 11 or 12 weeks.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, you can miss them, but there's certain parts that you definitely don't want to miss.
Well, what time is it? Because it will conflict with our meeting date
It is in the
once a
evening.
month.
Yeah, it's in the evening and it would conflict with this. However, you as a body, if you've got more than one member attending, you can always move this meeting like you did this week to a different day in order to accommodate. This is really valuable, especially for this body, and understanding the overall concept of regulation and law enforcement. So I encourage you to think about it if you can.
Do you know when it'll start?
Oh. 1 second. So the first week will be March 2nd. And the last week will be April 27th.
Okay, thank you.
And they are planning on having it here at the Inglewood Police Department Community Room, which is the first floor, all except for the week of March 23rd, which they're doing the shooting simulation and the driving simulation.
I know Monica attended it
She did.
before she joined this committee. So, okay, cool.
One more thing. Celebrate Inglewood is coming up on May 7th. We had it in the fall this last year. It was a very successful event. Every single city department and organization within the departments are represented. So it gives citizens of Inglewood an opportunity to go and meet with different departments as handouts, valuable information, very kid-friendly. Code enforcement, animal welfare has a big presence. We also will be doing another adoption affair where I think we adopted out 14 dogs last year during the event. So I'll mark that on your calendar, May 7th.
So I had a couple of questions. First of all, I'm really sorry to hear about the crash for the code officer, and I'm thankful to hear that they're okay. That 50 miles an hour is frightening. I've been in a crash like that. So that's, wow, that's great. So are they back?
They are on a modified duty. They just are not able to work in the field or drive a city vehicle due to the injury.
Got it. Okay. Well, please give them our condolences. That's tough. On the ice and snow removal, I had a question in terms of how we manage residences that are clearly not inhabited.
Yeah, that becomes a complicated situation. We do send notices of violation to those by the last known mailing address. As I said before, some of these properties where they're not inhabited or we're unable to track them down, we don't know who owns it or where to find them or how to hold them responsible.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then which park rate or which code enforcement officer is moving to Kansas? Which
Code Officer Joshua Ball.
okay.
He's the one that he's already left.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He was a sweetheart. Thrilled to hear about Off Leash doing so well. I don't know if you guys are on Nextdoor or on Instagram, but there's been a lot of posts, not just from Inglewood, but from neighboring communities about off-leash dogs. And it's basically residents pushing back against other residents who think it's okay to have their dog off leash. So I think we're all probably benefiting from that increased awareness. But I'm glad it's turning into more voluntary compliance. Okay, another one, I had a question on the turtles. You called it a red-billed.
Oh, red-eared spider.
Is that the little turtles?
They start out little, but they get big. But yeah, they're the ones that you see in the pet store all the time.
I didn't know those were an invasive species. What are they eating that is harmful?
So turtles eat just about anything, anywhere from rotten materials to plant materials to live fish. They're crowding out the native species. They can also be carnivorous. And so they're taking over where we would typically have a native species such as a snapping turtle. Last year, we identified a few soft shell turtles, which is very rare in this region of Colorado at Centennial. And so that's where the concern is. And they don't have any really natural predators.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I think those were my questions and comments. Any comments or questions from other members? All right, Member Dickerson.
I think I've answered my own question, but I have two. One was about off leash. I have noticed people that have complained about other dogs being off leash actually running their dogs off leash.
Okay. So seeing no further questions for Officer Lewis, let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, which is an update from City Council Liaison Russell, but she's not here. So we'll move through that unless anybody has anything they want to talk about regarding City Council that relates to us. Okay. Maureen,
You may want to bring up about the member that resigned, because that probably needs to go to city council.
got it. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to talk with Rita directly, although I did forward her the email. Cara Frangipani resigned her position on the committee effective immediately. So the next step is that we ask to see if we can have Member Redvid moved up from a alternate to a full-time member. I do want to look at her attendance. So before I recommend that, I want to make sure that's the right person to move into a full-time member capacity. Any questions regarding that? All right, I will tell you that Cara is on more than one committee, and I think she just got to a point where she was overcommitted and realized that. So we will miss her. All right, so that takes us into agenda item number 6, which is an update from our subcommittee on communications. That's Monica, but she's not present tonight. I know that, go ahead, David.
I just want to let you know that I did review the Citizen magazine, and there is the Emerald Ash Borer information is going out in the next Citizen magazine.
Awesome. I have not seen that yet, so that's good to hear. I know she's been working with the city on developing a media plan for 2022. So I'll follow up with her to see where she is with that, and then I believe that was it. So any comments about communications from the committee? Okay. Member Dickerson.
Yeah, I did send, I think I copied you on it and possibly Carson also, but I did, and I don't know how much of this is communications, but it was something that I had talked about at the last meeting, and Monica had asked me to update her on some things and lay out my comments. I just wanted to emphasize that we have the opportunity to get a grant from the Colorado Tree Coalition. They are accepting applications now for grants, and specifically for providing trees to replace emerald ash. And since she's not here, she's not going to be able to say that, but I think it's something that should be followed up, and whoever is responsible at the city for asking for grants should be taking advantage of this. There's also a grant from Excel for trees, and they're accepting the applications now.
You know what the timeline is for either of those?
Well, they're accepting, they're giving the grants. I don't know. It's, if you go on Colorado Tree Coalition website, just had it up. Okay, it says applications are now being received for fiscal year 2022. And they said we have 2 project categories and expect to award it regular community grants. Also, Excel Energy Vegetation Management grants are available to communities that are served by Excel Energy. A significant portion of this year's funding is dedicated to grants that address emerald ash borer related to planting in communities along the Front Range. And they're funded by the USDA Forest Service as a part of the Your Ash is on the Line project.
May I ask if someone from this committee might email me those details so I can forward them to Dave Lee and to, well, it would be his department. We have been looking and struggling with the idea, and maybe this is something this body can propose for for future budgets is actually having a full-time grant writer on staff. It's been talked about many times, and I think it's a missed opportunity. But we are losing out on grant money that's available, and that might be something this body might want to take up as consideration as a recommendation for next year.
If it's all right with you, I can email Dave Lee directly. It was Monica that was going to do it, but I can email him directly and copy everybody.
That would be perfect. Thank you, Kelly.
Anything else regarding communications? Otherwise, let's go ahead and move into unfinished business. And I put unfinished business before new business because new business can sidetrack us, and we'll still cover new business after we finish unfinished business. And then I also, before we get started, wanted to let you guys know about Cara, but also I need to cut our meeting short a half an hour. I'm not feeling very good, and I was at the doctor, and I tried to get my prescriptions picked up before our meeting started, and they weren't ready. They close at 8, so I got to get out of here at 7:30 to go pick up my prescriptions. So hopefully that's okay with you guys.
As
All right.
far as I'm concerned, you can cut it whenever you need to.
Okay.
We don't have a full complement, and some of
Yeah.
the things that we're needing to discuss, we really should have a full complement of members to do that.
Okay. I kind of agree with you, but we can get through a couple things and take it as far as we think we need to tonight. So the first thing that we have on our agenda is a review of our bylaws. That's something that we're required to do every year, and we did not do it last year because we did it in the fall of the prior year, and we decided to postpone it until 2022. I included our current bylaws in our meeting agenda. Did anyone have a chance to review it? And if you did you have anything that jumped out at you that we should reconsider? Member Dixon?
Yeah, I thought we had specified that we were going to do it in March with the election of the new chair, because it's the new chair that's going to need to know a lot about this. I wasn't aware that you were going to put it on the agenda, so I didn't look at it, and I didn't realize it was there.
Well, if we vote for a new chair in March, then we wouldn't want to do it in March. We would want to do it after March, right?
That's fine with me. April would be a good time to do it.
Can I have the other members of the committee weigh in on that, please?
I feel kind of indifferent about it. I mean, I feel like the efforts we put into that not that long ago were good. I mean, if someone's got something specific to modify that makes sense, I mean, great. But personally, I mean, I've gone through it and I don't have anything new, and it does make sense that, you know, if we end up with a different chair who has an opinion on that they have a chance to say something. So I'm not opposed to moving that out.
Okay. Robert and Sonia?
I agree with Member Green.
Okay. Sonia?
What Member Green said just makes complete sense. So I think it's just fine.
Okay. So we'll push that out a little bit further than this meeting, and I probably think move it to April. And I went through it, and I mean, we spent, gosh, a better part of a half a year going through it, and I still look at it through those lenses right now, so I can't see any changes. So it might be good to have fresh eyes look at that. So we'll get that moved out. Okay.
So we don't have anyone on deck like joining this committee right now, do we? We've lost Frangipani, and then we potentially will move up the alternate, but there's nobody else right now, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I know that they just went through interviews.
Yeah, because they just did a whole round of it.
Maureen?
Oh, yes, there'll be a whole nother round in July, and there'll be two vacancies on this board. It'll be your position, Chair Bowden, and Member Dickerson's positions are both up. And then we have the vacancy right now, so.
So nothing happens between now and July?
If you want to move up the alternate, yeah, that can happen before July. But the reason that nobody knew anything about the interviews is because we didn't have any vacancies and nobody's terms were up. That's why nobody on this committee was involved in the January appointment.
Got it.
So, but yes, in between now and then, you can have somebody appointed to fill a vacancy.
As in moving up the alternate.
Moving up the alternate or asking for applications.
Okay. 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 All right, so we'll go ahead and move the bylaws. And then I will be talking with Rita about the alternate position and whether we move that position up. So next on the agenda is EAB follow-up. Now, remember, I put this on the agenda just because we had decided that all the assignments we made were going to be due in February, but I wanted to put it on the agenda in case anyone had anything that they wanted the committee to review or look at. I know at the last meeting, Colleen, you were talking about the different criteria that we compare on cities. And you sent me a draft of that. And if you would like to have this committee look at the criteria and give feedback at this point, now would be the time.
That would be fine. But I sent you an updated one because the way it got printed out in the packet, I couldn't even understand it. So I updated it and cleaned it up as best I could. Unfortunately, I didn't get it out to Carson in time for him to make it look real pretty. But for some reason, the way it got printed was not, something fell off in the transmission. And I cleaned it up and I've got it on my screen, but I don't have any way of I can share it.
So
Well,
I'm
even
looking
just
at-
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was
Carson.
just gonna say, even just what ended up in the packet is discussable, because I would think that until we fill out the main thing that would be worth everyone potentially putting input on is what are the categories we're including in the matrix. And, you've done a good job, Member Dickerson, of breaking that out already and filling it in for Boulder and Arvada. And I started filling it in for some of the other municipalities that we had data on. I haven't sent that to you guys yet. I just started on that today. But if anyone has any thoughts on the breakdown of what we want to take into account in that list of categories that you broke out, any other ones we want to add, et cetera, it's something we could discuss right now.
It would be helpful if we go through the list of the criteria that we're using to compare, just so we understand what that criteria means. I'm not sure that I understood everything. Would it be best for Colleen to go through this and walk us through it, or would you, who wants to do that? You want to do?
Yeah, I think Member Dickerson, she did this breakdown, and so informing us on what all of those are makes sense, and then we can think of other ones as we go through it.
Okay. So Colleen, if you can just go through the left column that looks like that's what you're comparing the different cities on, what that criteria means.
Okay, I'll do my best. I thought if we were really going to compare, we needed to put everything in context. So I started with home rule and whether or not there were any subsidies. And
so subsidies for
tree planting, removal of trees, whatever. And then whether or not they prohibited any trees, because we do, but in my opinion, it's kind of pointless because we have no way of enforcing it. And the fact is that the trees we're prohibiting are already prohibited in Title 16, and we don't have any way of enforcing it. And the larger they get, the bigger the problem, and they're self-propagating. So just to see what other cities are doing. No, so far, I don't have any. Boulder, who would be the most likely to come down on citizens, does not prohibit any trees, not
So-
even
so-
ash trees.
So the question is there anything in their current code that prohibits any type of tree?
No, there's nothing.
No, but that's the question though. That's the question
Yeah.
you're looking at for each city is, do they prohibit trees in their code?
Yeah.
Okay.
And their tree city status, I thought that was important because at least these two that I looked at went above and beyond our tree city status. I mean, it's really elaborate what they've done. So I thought, it'd be important to show that for context. Authority over public trees and ordinance. That's one of the requirements of the most minimal tree city status. Who's got the authority over public trees? Who has the legal authority over public trees? Would you like me to rephrase that?
Yeah.
And how would you like that rephrased?
You went on mute, Chair Bowden.
Are you on mute?
Yes. Now I'm off. So I want to get away from talking about Tree City versus comparing programs and codes between cities. So what I'm reading here is that, is there something in their current code that gives authority over public trees? Is that the question?
Yeah, the authority in Boulder and the authority in Arvada, it's in their code, and it's Urban Forestry Department and the Urban Forestry Team.
Got it.
So is there any, I just said authority over public trees in ordinance. Is that sufficient? Okay.
I think so.
And then budget, because that's another contextual indication of the Tree City standard.
So what does budget refer to? Is there a budget for tree programs or? what?
Yeah, that's the budget for their tree program.
And that's actually in the code of Boulder.
Well, it wasn't specifically in the code, but it was publicized as their budget applied. And it's not just for the Urban Forestry Department. It is there are a whole bunch of other departments that have tree, like Public Works, it takes care of all the public trees and the trees in the rights of way and in the alleys and in the right of way. So their total budget, and they're a much larger city and they have a lot more trees to deal with, but they have a pretty big budget. And I just thought for context, we needed to know that because we don't know what our budget is. We've gotten no information other than, yeah, well, we've got $2 a citizen, but it's not earmarked, it's not specific, and we don't know anything about it.
I think
And
that's
I
useful
get-
information. If it's possible to gather it, that seems like useful information to include in what we report to city council. I mean, we may not be able to get that from several of the municipalities, and it's obviously not necessarily directly defined in code, but I agree that that's useful info to include for where we can get it.
Yeah, if we can clarify that what we mean is a tree specific budget versus just.
Okay, I'll say tree specific budget. Okay,
Member
I'll be
Watson,
happy
your
to do that.
Member Watson, your hand's raised?
Does that budget include grants and, I don't know, donations and things like that? Is that just something that they accumulate in their budget, or are they given that?
Uh, Boulder is very specific about how much they care about trees. And they brag about having gotten the city council to budget over the last, I don't remember how many years, because that wasn't quite clear. But they brag about having budgeted over $10 million for their tree canopy, their public tree canopy. But I've got the partnerships and the grants at a lower place because they are separate. They're specifically for the Arbor Day Foundation. I mean, the Arbor Day sale, the grants that they get.
Thank you.
But, yeah,
That's a great
thanks
point,
for the
though.
question, because I just took their word for it. I didn't look in any depth into their budget. I just took their word because they are very proud of how much money they spend. And I didn't get that information for Arvada yet. It wasn't as, they're not as proud of how much money they spend.
I like that point though, and I think it's worth breaking that out if we can identify any information about what the other municipalities are getting from grants or donations. Be useful to know if if possible.
Well, I was
Well,
just thinking there might be something that we're not thinking of or looking at that might be included in their numbers.
Sure.
I do know that Colorado Tree Coalition identified who got their grants in 2019 because they've got it on their website. I can always ask, but everybody that, like Arvada was very specific. They have videos of their planting efforts. They showed where they had identified the first case of EAB. And it was next to Homestead Park, which is their closest park to Boulder. And they had this really long, involved, and very happy video. It was fun to watch about planting trees in Homestead Park, which was pretty bare. So, and they talked about how they got grants from Excel. They were partnered with Excel on the Arbor Day Foundation. And Boulder does some of that, but whether they actually get grant money or not, but it's specifically for Arbor Day sales. So I'll try to break that out a little better and see if we can get the information. And anybody that wants to start making calls to any city and say, hey, how many grants have you gotten and where have you gotten them from and how much were they and were they specifically for trees? I'd appreciate the help. Because I've had a few setbacks this week myself, or this last month.
One thing I wondered, do we want to consider, so right now we have, I went back to the original data we collected, Chair Bowden. So we had Boulder, Arvada, Broomfield, Lafayette, Longmont, Westminster, and Denver. Is that all we want to include? Are there any other municipalities we want to try to include, or we're just going to stick with the breakout that we originally did when we did this in 2020?
Did you have a city in mind that you thought we might want to look at that?
No, not necessarily. I just thought of it because we're talking about, I mean, there is Sheridan is close, Lakewood. There are other ones that might be worth considering. I mean, it might even be worth considering some further out in the Front Range, Springs or whatever. I just wondered if that was, if our list is going to be what we had started with, or if we wanted to consider, more, because it might be a good idea since the data that we collected from what I went through we don't have enough to fill in this grid. I like this categorization that Member Dickerson's come up with. I mean, so far as she's explained, And I think it's going to take work to do more collection, and it might be worth doing another round of assigning cities to different members to try to collect it again for the specifics that now we have it broken out. So if we're going to do that, it might be worth, if we're going to consider any others, it's just a thought for discussion.
Okay. Well, let's get through this, the list of criteria, and then while you guys are looking this, if you think that there's additional cities that you would like to look at, that's not that time consuming. Once you have the list of criteria to go into one city and look at their, at what they're doing for EAB.
Okay, the next one is how many public trees are being managed? How many have they identified? I don't think we've identified how many public trees we have. But Boulder went to a great deal of trouble to identify their trees, but I'm getting two different counts. From when we first did this in 2019, I have a printout of public trees of 51,000. And when I went through and looked, they only had 50,000 public trees, but they had done a complete inventory of public trees.
So you've got three numbers here. You've got public trees in total. Then you have, of the public trees, how many are ash?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what does saving public ash trees refer to?
Well, I could use better wording on that. It refers to their commitment to saving a certain number of ash trees. Boulder was very specific that they are going to try to save 1,300 of the 6,000 ash trees they have on public lands. And Arvada has a different set. They didn't say how many public trees, at least I didn't find how many public ash trees they had. But they did indicate that they had a total of 97,000. I think that's what that says. And they're only going to try to say 700 of them.
Okay, and then trees planted public, does that mean how many trees the city plants per year in public right away?
Well, actually, Boulder has said, and 2 years ago, they said they were committed to planting 500 trees a year. I believe that 2,900 figure is how many trees they've planted since they started their program. But I have to double check and see if information I got in 2019 is still accurate. But that's what they published, that so far in their program, they've planted 2,900 trees on public property.
So that one's going to be tough to try to do. I mean, especially if different cities may or may not even have programs or when they started. If we want to make the criteria something that we have a chance of getting data across all these different municipalities, we might want to think about it as a per year thing or a commitment or something that's actually comparable.
Well, we could put in a separate category. I doubt very many cities have tried to do this, but they may have. Things have changed since 2019. And the big fire that was up there in Boulder County may have changed a lot of things, because whole swaths of public trees and private trees are gone. It may be a good thing in the sense that if there were a lot of ash trees, that stops the spread of emerald ash borer from those areas at any rate. But I understand what you're saying, and unless they make it public in their program, that's just going to be blank.
And so trees planted private, that refers to how many new trees are put on private property a year?
Yes, from Arbor Day sales from that time period. I could not get a breakdown from, for how long it had been. But
Okay.
perhaps I should say, to date.
Well, so I'm trying to keep in mind what the charge was. The idea was to compare programs and codes across multiple cities. And what we're looking at here is primarily data on existing trees and data on budgets, but we don't have anything in terms of programs that they're doing to help residents with EAB, either to purchase. I mean, I think that's what I'm looking for. And so I'm getting lost in what's reported here.
Well,
but
maybe
what-
I should put another heading in programs, because this is specifically information from Arbor Day sales. And their program, most of the programs that I've seen in all the ones I've looked at were merely educational. And Boulder and Arvada actually are bragging about their Arbor Day sales, their sales that are sponsored by elementary schools and high schools, and their partnership with Excel and Colorado Tree Coalition. So actually, the trees, the program is in Boulder to plant 500 public trees a year. They have a very specific criteria. And in 2019, this is what they said: planting trees and making more trees available to residents is their answer to their Boulder tree crisis of 2019. The best countermeasure against EAB tree losses and future tree threats is to plant a more diverse tree canopy and protect our existing trees. Hence, the city is planting 500 new trees annually of a diverse palette of tree species in our city, parks, and public street rights-of-way. They also have a program, and I didn't know how to work all of this information in, but their program is they're responsible for all rights-of-way trees, even if they're in the alley. But they allow citizens in the fall to make an application for a street tree. Maybe they don't like the tree that's there, or there is no tree there. So citizens can, in the fall, make an application to get a street tree. The city comes out and investigates what would be best for the location. Is the location suitable? And they partner with Excel to make sure it won't interfere with electric lines or won't be any problem. And the only thing they ask the citizen to do is, once they plant the tree and the city pays for everything, all the citizen has to do is sign an agreement that they will keep the tree watered and mulched. It's a free permit, it's a free program, but the city controls all the trees and they pay for the maintenance, with the exception of water and mulching. So that's a program. They've got a big educational program going on. I don't know if it's still in operation, but this is an example. I don't think you can even read this, but it's, they asked citizens if they want to, is take a pledge to help Boulder trees. I don't know how to put that into a matrix, except maybe with an asterisk. Maybe I just say programs, plant trees 500 a year annually, if it's available. But they say citizens can map the trees on their property to help the city. But I think it's already been done, because they've got a 66-page inventory and a strategic plan on how to move forward and protect the tree canopy and plant more trees and get citizens involved with doing it. The Arbor Day program is the main program of all the cities I've looked at so far. So I could expand on this so we could fill it out if the cities have anything by saying, okay, programs, Arbor Day sales. That's what I was going to talk to. I think the original thing that I sent out was, I'm not sure it's logical or organized the right way yet. And so what do you think about me just saying programs, Arbor Day sales, plans, to date plantings,
Well,
to put it
so-
all in context?
So I'm going to go back to our original presentation to City Council on what we recommended changes in terms of modifying code. And part of that conversation resulted in an awareness to council that other cities had subsidies and programs in place to help residents with managing the EAB issue, and they asked us to identify what those were. And my concern is that we're getting too far into the weeds and we're missing the point of the exercise.
Well, that's why I suggested changing, adding a caption programs. Because it's not just about EAB, there's a lot of other things.
But we only care about EAB. We're not looking at the city's management of trees and totals. We're trying to identify what the city can do to help residents. We're not reviewing the comprehensiveness of our city's tree program in general. We're looking specifically at how we can help residents manage the EAB issue.
Well, if we're comparing what we're doing or trying to determine what we're going to do, we need to know what other cities are doing. So I recommend that I just add in programs and reorganize it so everything about EAB is there. I think Carson wants to say something.
Carson?
Yeah, Chair Bowden. So our presentation to City Council was definitely prompted by and primarily about EAB, but it was also there were other aspects of the recommendations around tree shrub code too, like definition of a mature tree. Like, I think that should be one of the criteria to see what other codes, in the grid, why not have, if the codes have definition of a mature tree, what the differences might be there, whether they've got some difference on arborist definition or responsibility, whether there's a difference around responsibility right away. Those things aren't completely specific to EAB, but they were part of our presentation. Or are you thinking that, and maybe I remember wrong, is the only thing that they asked for us to come back with specifically EAB, or was it also these other?
No, you're right. I mean, there's crossover there, but it's all as it relates to the upcoming infestation. For example, we identified that Inglewood as a city had not specified our commitment to the tree canopy. And that to us was a huge miss because clearly every other city had done that. But the part that I'm struggling with is we're getting into budgets and numbers of ash trees, and I'm not sure what the purpose of that is when they're asking, okay, if other cities are helping people, how are they helping people?
Sure.
So some of the things that I wrote down are do they have a subsidy to help people purchase trees, remove trees, treat trees, any of the above?
Yeah, I agree that that's missing and primary.
That's the first thing on the list under home rule, though. Do they have a subsidy? And the only subsidy that I found so far, other than taking on the responsibility as the city, for public trees is Arbor Day subsidy. They buy the trees and subsidize the cost to the citizens, so the citizens don't have to pay the full price. And they also, I don't know that Boulder does, but also that others get the grants and use that for the subsidization of tree planting. And that's about the only thing they can do, is encourage tree planting. And Boulder does it more than anybody else does by paying for street trees and taking care of everything in the right of way themselves. And that's a subsidy in my mind.
I think they're looking for more of a direct subsidy program, like we talked last meeting about a voucher program.
Right.
So
I
it's
agree
more-
that we should have that categorization like you described, Chair Bowden. So there's no reason not to have, even if all of them are, the answer is no, it makes sense to have the criteria of EAB subsidy removal, EAB subsidy treatment, EAB subsidy replacement, and then maybe even break that out by right away or not, between private or not.
Yeah, and we had identified that the right of way was a gap for our code. And I think you did include that in here, is that who's responsible for right of way.
Yeah, she did.
Okay, so that's in there. And the other thing is I'd like to see, do the other cities, do they have a section on the importance of the tree canopy? Is that included in their code?
Yeah, I didn't know quite how to word that. Boulder is very, very, I mean, in 66 pages, they talk about trees are important for climate change. They combat climate change. Shade cuts energy costs. There's a whole list of things that, water retention prevents flooding. But I don't think they have as much high density development as we have. So we do need to encourage a lot more trees on our open space. And a lot of what our code has prevents people from wanting trees that they might have to be responsible to remove or treat or trim. In my street, a lot of people have trees, but a lot more don't, because they don't want to be responsible to the city for cleaning up the trees or maintaining the trees in the rights of way. So they're bare. Front yards are bare. And Boulder considers it their job to convince citizens to love the trees and plant them. And they use their tax dollars and prioritize trees. We even have a name, wood, in our name, but I don't see that we're prioritizing trees when we're not even doing Arbor Day sales to the maximum that we could do them. And that's why I mentioned the Tree City Coalition grants, because it's not a money-making proposition, and we shouldn't not do planting, which is the only thing we can do to protect our tree canopy, is to plant more trees that aren't subject to diseases.
Okay, some of the other areas that I'd like to see us do a comparison on, and I'm referring directly to the presentation that we gave to educate council on what we were recommending, was the property owner versus the city responsibility for preservation and removal of a tree. Have that as
Well,
a
that's what I've got in here. I do have that in here. It may not be very clear. We do need to change some of the, see, it says responsibility for installation and removal. In Boulder, it's the city. I haven't identified what it is in our body.
But is that right of way? Is that public? Is that private?
It's
So
yeah,
this-
it's right of way and public trees.
So,
And I've
yeah.
also identified whether they can, whether citizens can plant trees in the right of way or the public, in parks. And they can, as long as they go through this, the city and apply for a permit, and the city comes out and decides whether, what tree belongs there, whether it's the right location for any tree, and then they pay for the tree and the planting of the tree and the maintenance of the tree.
So what I'm
How would you
looking-
like me to phrase it?
I don't know. I'm having trouble finishing my sentences. So
I'm sorry.
one of the things that I said is that we need to clarify that the city has the right to plant, prune, maintain, and remove trees in the right of way. So I would want to know, do other cities have that right in their code? And then secondly, code enforcement has the duty to effect removal of dead, dying trees if property owners refuse or fail to respond. So what do other cities do in that situation? And you don't have to
Boulder.
answer me now. I'm just saying that this is the type of criteria that, it needs to, we educated city council on what we wanted, what we were proposing, and they came back and said, well, we want to see what other cities are doing in some of these areas. And it's more than what you've got here is much bigger than that. And I think we can condense this and keep it a little more simple. It's a lot of data, and I can tell you've done a lot of work here. It's just, we need to make sure we understand our audience and what they were seeking for. And their question is, okay, if we need, let us know what other cities are doing in these areas. Do you guys have a copy of the presentation that we gave to the city where we recommended everything? So what I'd like to recommend is that you guys go through that and see if we can do comparisons on those issues that we were recommending, firstly. And then secondly, we also have, put together proposals on programs and resolutions that we were going to present to the city, to city council. And, one was based on financial assistance and incentives. What do other cities do there? Arborist services, do they contract with other arborists on behalf of the citizens? Are they doing any programs in that area? Let's see. That type of thing. Does anybody else have any comments or questions or direction that you think we should give? I'd like to hear from other members. Colleen, please. Sonia, Robert, Carson.
Yeah, everything you just said makes sense. And I don't know why when I start speaking, I'm hearing background noise. Everything you just said makes sense. And that's pretty much what I had listed out when I went through this and my ideas of modification was I did exactly what you just did. I went through the presentation and marked those, and listed those things out. So that totally makes sense. If we can get, obviously, if there really are incentives or arborist deals or any of those things elsewhere, that would be huge to know and convey. I think that the numbers, if it's not hard to find about numbers of ash trees, if that can be in the grid, since it's an easy thing to include, if we have the data, that's not a bad thing. Just for perspective for the whole thing. Most of what's here, I think is useful for viewing it, but I agree with you that the focus should be on the specifics that we went over with city council when we met with them. So I agree with your direction.
So And
And
that.
I've
that
taken
will-
notes on everything you said too,
Yeah, and that
so
will make the job simpler. I mean, while I appreciate having this data, I know you went through, you basically have researched every city. And that's a lot of work. And I don't think we need to do that. I know, I think you're, one thing you might be concerned about is that there's reasons behind why cities do things. And in Boulder's case, it's because, they have more trees or whatever. But if we get into that level of detail, we're gonna lose the audience here. Again, what they're looking for is, are there any subsidies or programs that we can put in place to help residents deal with the EAB issue? And if so, are other cities doing those? And if you want to keep the information that you've gathered and the other criteria, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we answer that question.
I was gonna ask for Code Manager Lewis, do you have any thoughts on questions that would be useful to answer around code enforcement, right of way, responsibility, access, rules? Are there any things that, as we're going through looking at all the different municipalities, that would be useful for you to know and including in this?
Our biggest concern with the ordinance is not what you're all proposing. The concern that we have is, one, the enforceability, who's going to enforce this, and two, who's going to do that? Those are that's the biggest issue that I have. A lot of the ordinance, the way that it's worded, really pertains to new building, building standards. Is there something particular that you want me to look at or consider?
Well, so one of the clearly different things that we've identified so far is the Boulder, the city is responsible for right of way, and Inglewood, the citizens are, or it's somewhat ambiguous. I wondered if there was anything around specifics on that you would see as criteria that we could break out and maybe, have yes or no's across all the cities, just while we're gathering this data and looking at all these different codes, that
You
kind of
could
thing.
always ask, does the city maintain the right of way? Are public citizens responsible for public right of way? Just break it down very simple. I do have a concern about that. I don't think it's feasible at this point to have the city and Inglewood maintain the right of way, but I think you're looking to see comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges kind of a situation so that you have the appropriate data. It's probably going to be very difficult for you to obtain that information without reviewing. And I know Member Dickerson and you, Member Green, have scoured over so many different codes with so many different cities. I have a hard time even just keeping up with our current codes and to compare codes. So hats off to you for doing that. There was another thing that you mentioned about street trees that caught my attention because the city doesn't currently plant trees because in that manner, like Boulder would, because they have a significant, in some of the older neighborhoods where there is a sidewalk, a significant easement, and then the roadway. And so they plant trees and are maintained by the city, but I'm not aware of any trees that are maintained by the city in Inglewood currently that are public right of way outside of parks or property we own. So I think maybe just breaking it down even simpler. I think what city council, and I wish Rita was here, is really looking for, what are other cities doing to provide assistance to our residents? Outside of just the code, but how are they going to fund this? Where are we going to get the funding source? Which we can figure that part out. It's what is Boulder doing? What is Broomfield doing? What is Louisville or Lafayette doing? And how can we be similar? We're also very small in size. So what we can do may be very limited. We're under 7 square miles. The
But
one thing
it's-
that
yeah.
you have going for you is the new the tax assessments. And so there will be some extra money coming into the city over the next couple of years.
Thank you.
But I think
Uh,
posing, sorry again, I think posing what other cities are doing or what you all would like to see, like a list of things that you would like to see presented to them and allowing them to figure out, you all don't need to do that. Where does the money come from? How are we going to pay for this? What's the long-term goal? Let the legislative body take care of that. You all make sure that you propose, these are the things that we'd like to see.
Member Strom, you had your hand raised?
Yes. Well, I know for all the trees for Denver next to the street, the citizens are responsible for the care of it. And if the tree starts to fall apart or die or have problems and the citizen doesn't take care of it, Denver will come in and that just send you a bill, or then it'll become a tax lien. And basically Aurora does the same thing. So
That is where
That's
you all
also
may, I'm sorry, you all may want to propose a change. Not wording, but say we'd like the code enforcement or the city forester to have the ability to do this. We currently can't abate stuff. If it's an outright danger and an arborist has said it's a danger and the person doesn't take care of it, we won't go on their private property to remove it. But if it's like a street and it's falling into a street and there's no contention, then the city.
yeah, these are the ones right next to the street.
Yeah, that's the public right away. Yeah.
Yeah,
So if it's a danger, the city will abate it. We've sent bills for storm damage and stuff where insurance companies have reimbursed the city back.
So I think if we follow, the 4 items that we identified for city council, pretty much just use that as our guide in terms of what criteria we compare on. And we also have our proposal for EAB programs that we put together. And if you don't have that, I'm happy to send that to you. If you use those 2 documents as the guide for the comparison, I think that we'll get a more concise picture of the types of things that each of the cities are doing to aid residents. And I'm going to have to stop our conversation. I have to go get my drugs tonight. It's just so hard to do the basic things right now. I've had such an awful day trying to get stuff done and get into the doctor or whatever. So before we sign off, I'd like to select the date of our next meeting, which looks like it would be the 16th of February, which is almost 4 weeks away. Does that work for everybody? Maureen and Carson? Oh, Carson, that's right.
So I'm on this Elevate Inglewood program, and that is one of the nights for it. So, I mean, if it worked for everyone to do the 17th instead again, that would work. That would make it so I could do both still.
Fine with me. Maureen, you have your hand raised?
Yes, because I'll be on vacation, but the 17th would be okay.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and sign it for then. And then want to thank Colleen and Carson for all the hard work you've done to get this matrix together. I know it's a web. You go down one path and it just leads to more paths. So I know it's a lot. But maybe if we can scale you back and focus you on these specific areas, that the task will be easier. And then Carson, if you think we should add more cities and you need help doing that, I'm available to help you guys do that. So
Just to be clear, this has been primarily Member Dickerson. I haven't done much yet, but I will be over this next month.
let us know if you need help.
I know you're going to conclude the meeting. I might want to suggest that you do a simple questionnaire or a survey, and you possibly reach out to somebody in the city by email. I have tremendous success in gathering that information. They may be receptive if you say that you're working on this program on behalf of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee to help mitigate this. They may be willing to just voluntarily participate.
Thank you. Member Dickerson.
Real quickly, I think I've answered most of your concerns. I just need to rephrase it so that it's clearer.
Okay, thank you. All right, you all have a good rest of your evening and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you, I will. Bye-bye.